I found out my wife was cheating on a Wednesday night in January 2026. The kind of winter night where the cold makes everything feel sharper and more honest. I was sitting in my truck in our driveway in Columbus, Ohio, engine off, heater still ticking, staring at the garage door like it had answers. I always sat there after work for a minute because the day clung to me, and home was supposed to peel it off. That night, my wife Emily's phone was on the passenger seat because she had left it in my cup holder after we ran errands. I was not snooping, not reaching for it, not doing anything heroic. The screen lit up on its own from a notification and I saw a name I did not recognize, saved as Mark H., and the preview line hit me like a blunt object. It was not explicit. It was worse than explicit. It said he could still taste her, and he needed her again soon, and he hated pretending they were just colleagues. Colleagues. That word landed with a cold little click in my brain. Emily worked in HR for a mid-sized logistics company. I knew the names of her friends, the names of her managers, the names of the people who showed up at our cookouts. Mark H. was not one of those names. I sat there frozen, not because I did not understand what I was reading, but because I understood it too fast. My body did that thing it does when a truth arrives that you're not ready to hold. Your chest tightens. Your hands go numb. Your brain tries to build 1,000 escape routes in half a second. I told myself it could be a joke. I told myself it could be a wrong message. I told myself Mark H. could be a woman. I stared at the screen waiting for the next notification like I was waiting for a judge to finish a sentence. It buzzed again. The second preview said Thursday works, same place, same time, and she should wear the gray hoodie because he liked how she looked in it. The gray hoodie was mine. Not the idea of mine, not something similar, but the exact one I wore when I mowed the lawn and ran to the gas station and felt like a normal husband. My mouth went dry and my stomach dropped in a slow, heavy way. I did not open the message thread. I did not need to. The previews were enough to rewrite my entire week. I walked inside anyway. That is the part that still embarrasses me. I stepped into our warm kitchen like I had not just watched my marriage crack open on a phone screen. Emily was at the counter in sweatpants and socks, hair pulled up, humming softly while she cleaned a pan. She looked peaceful. She looked safe. She looked like the woman I married 8 years ago when I thought loyalty was the easiest promise in the world. She turned, smiled, asked how work was, and I answered like an actor who forgot he was hired. My voice sounded normal. My face did not betray me. I hate that I was capable of that. She came over, kissed me, asked if I wanted chili, told me her day was crazy but she survived. I nodded, said the right things, and watched her phone light up on the island a few minutes later. I did not touch it. I did not pick it up. I just saw the banner preview because she left the screen facing up like someone who had never considered consequences. Mark H. again. This time the line was short and confident. He said he could not stop thinking about her in our kitchen. Something in me went quiet. Not calm. Not peace. More like a circuit breaker flipping to prevent a fire. I excused myself, walked into the bathroom, shut the door, and stared at myself in the mirror like I was checking whether I was still a real person. I looked tired. I looked ordinary. I looked like a man who did everything he was supposed to do. I worked. I paid the mortgage. I cooked on weekends. I took care of things. I listened when Emily talked about stress and family and her plans for the future. I was not perfect, but I was present. And now I was staring at proof that presence did not guarantee respect. I wanted to confront her right then. Every instinct screamed for it. Ask who Mark is. Ask why she is texting him like that. Ask if she has been in our kitchen with him. But I could already see how that conversation would go. First denial, then confusion, then a story that made me sound paranoid, then tears, then apologies, then the same question every betrayed husband hates because it is designed to soften the blow. How could you not trust me? If I confronted her with nothing but a banner preview, she would have room to twist reality. If I touched her phone, I knew the story would stop being about what she did and start being about what I did. I was not going to hand her that escape. I could not stand the thought of being gaslit in my own house. So I made a decision that felt disgusting and practical at the same time. I was going to collect proof quietly. I was going to confirm everything until there was no escape hatch for excuses. I would not give her a chance to rewrite my instincts as insecurity. I would not let myself become the villain in the story of her betrayal. That is the moment the situation stopped being a marriage problem and became an investigation, not because I wanted drama, but because I wanted clarity. That night I lay in bed next to Emily and did not sleep. She fell asleep fast, curled toward me like she still belonged there, breathing slow and even. I stared at the ceiling and replayed the last 6 months like a surveillance tape. The Thursday meetings she started mentioning casually. The sudden interest in the gym. The new perfume that she said was a sample from a coworker. The way she started protecting her phone with her body in small unconscious movements, angling the screen away without thinking. Each detail alone was nothing. Together, they formed a pattern so obvious that I felt stupid for missing it. The worst part was that I still loved her. Not the version of her texting Mark H. The version of her I thought I knew. The woman who laughed too loudly at dumb movies, who cried at dog rescue videos, who used to crawl onto the couch next to me and lean her head on my shoulder like home was a place we built together. Loving her made everything harder because love tries to bargain with reality. Love says maybe it is not that bad. Love says maybe you can fix it. Love is a liar when it is desperate. By the time the sun came up, I had a plan, and it was not dramatic. It was boring and methodical, which is exactly what makes it scary. I would watch for patterns. I would check finances for repeated places. I would pay attention to schedules. I would not follow her like a movie villain. I would simply stop ignoring the facts in front of me. I went to work that morning and acted normal, and every time my phone buzzed I felt my body tense. Because I knew someone else was getting the messages that used to be mine. Act 1 ended that day with one clear truth lodged in my chest. Emily was living 2 lives, and I was only invited to the one that paid bills and kept the lights on. I was still her husband in public. Somewhere else, she was someone else entirely. And I had just become the only person in our house who knew it. Once I stopped trusting the story Emily was telling me, the details started lining up on their own. It felt less like digging and more like finally seeing what had always been there. People do not change their routines for no reason. They change them to make space. Emily had made space carefully, the way someone does when they plan to keep everything else intact. Thursdays became the clearest example. She always left the house earlier than usual, dressed better than she needed to be for a normal office day, and she stopped asking me about my schedule on those mornings. That detail mattered. When people want privacy, they stop checking where you will be. She said traffic was worse lately. She said her team had standing meetings. She said a lot of things that sounded reasonable if you wanted them to. I stopped wanting them to. What I did not know yet was that Thursday was not the worst part. The worst part was how replaceable I already was. I did not touch her phone. That would have crossed a line I was not ready to cross yet. Instead, I watched patterns. I checked our shared credit card statement one night after she went to bed, not hunting for hotel charges like a stereotype, just scanning for repetition. There it was. A modern coffee shop near an office complex on the north side of the city. Same day every week. Same time window. Always just one charge. 2 drinks. Never food. That told me enough to picture it clearly. This was not lunch. This was a meeting. There were small cracks I noticed later. A missed call from him late at night that disappeared by morning. A notification she cleared too fast. Nothing dramatic. Just enough to know they were not as careful as they thought. I drove past the place the next day under the excuse of running errands. It was clean, busy, anonymous. The kind of place where nobody looks twice at 2 coworkers sitting close and talking quietly. It was smart. It made me angry in a new way. This was not reckless desire. This was planning. The emotional escalation hit harder than the logistical one. Emily became warmer at home, more attentive, more affectionate. She laughed at my jokes again. She initiated sex in a way she had not in months. To someone who wanted reassurance, it would have felt like things improving. To me, it felt like guilt being managed. She was maintaining balance, stability with me, excitement somewhere else. I realized I was not competing with another man. I was part of a system. The moment that confirmed it came from a mistake on her part. A small one. I was grabbing something from the pantry when I saw a sticky note inside the door. A name and a time. Mark. 3:30. It was written casually, like it belonged there. I stood there longer than necessary, just staring at it, feeling the last layer of doubt peel away. When Emily walked in behind me, she froze for half a second. Half a second is all it takes. She grabbed the note, laughed lightly, said it was a reminder for a work call, and changed the subject. She did not look me in the eye. From that point on, the house felt different. Not hostile, just staged. Like I was living inside a set where every interaction had a purpose I was not supposed to know. I started noticing how often she checked her reflection before leaving the room, how she carried her phone even to places she never used to, how she answered messages with her body turned slightly away from me. None of it was dramatic. That is what made it convincing. The escalation became personal when I realized who Mark was. I had met him months earlier at a work mixer Emily insisted I attend. He had shaken my hand, smiled, asked polite questions about my job. He was married. He had talked about his kids. The memory replayed in my head with a new context that made my skin crawl. This was not a random affair. This was proximity. This was familiarity. And that meant it had been happening long enough for me to stop being the center of my own marriage. This was someone who had looked me in the eye and then stepped into my life anyway. At that point, anger started knocking, but I did not let it in yet. Anger makes noise. Noise ruins leverage. What I felt instead was something colder and more focused. I stopped wondering if Emily would choose me if I confronted her. I started wondering how far she was willing to go to protect the life she was building on the side. Every lie after that became data. Every affectionate gesture felt calculated. By the end of Act 2, I was no longer reacting to betrayal. I was tracking behavior. I was no longer asking why this was happening. I was asking how long it had been happening and what it would cost her if it stopped. The marriage I thought I had was already gone. What remained was a structure held together by my silence, and I was beginning to understand how much power that silence actually gave me. The turning point did not come from something I searched for. It came from something that stepped into my path while I was pretending to live a normal life. That is how most truths arrive. Not announced, just inconveniently placed where you can no longer avoid them. I ran into Mark's wife on a Sunday afternoon at a grocery store near our neighborhood. Her name was Lauren. I recognized her immediately, not because we were close, but because memory has a way of sharpening when it needs to protect you. We had spoken briefly months earlier at that work mixer, exchanging polite smiles and nothing more. This time she looked tired in a way that felt familiar. The same tight smile, the same careful posture. She asked how Emily was doing, and I answered with a neutral line that revealed nothing. Then she mentioned Mark had been working late a lot lately, especially on Thursdays, and laughed like the sentence needed help landing. That laugh told me more than the words did. It was the laugh of someone explaining a story they were still trying to believe. I did not accuse. I did not hint. I just listened and nodded and felt something heavy settle into place. There were two houses running on the same schedule, and neither wife had been given the full script. The discovery deepened a few days later when Emily casually mentioned she would be traveling for a weekend conference out of state. She said it quickly, like it was old information I must have forgotten. No build-up, no complaints, No details. I asked where it was. She answered immediately. Too immediately. That night I checked our shared calendar, our shared email threads, our expense app. There was nothing. No flights. No hotel. No paperwork. That conference existed only as a story. On Thursday, I took a personal day from work and did the one thing I had been avoiding because it made everything final. I drove to the coffee shop. I parked across the street where I could see the entrance clearly without hiding. At 3:28, Mark walked out of the building next door. Calm. Unhurried. Familiar. At 3:32, Emily joined him. They did not touch. They did not rush. They walked side by side like people who had done this often enough that they did not need to prove anything. That hurt more than any kiss would have. Comfort is louder than passion. They left together in his car. And in the passenger seat, I saw my gray hoodie, the one she'd taken from our closet. I did not follow them. I did not need to. That image locked everything into place. This was not a moment of weakness. This was a routine, a system, a shared understanding that both of them would go home later and resume their original lives without disruption. That night, Lauren messaged me on Facebook. Just one sentence asking if everything was okay with Emily lately because Mark had been distant. Just one sentence asking if everything was okay with Emily lately because Mark had been distant. I stared at the message longer than I should have. This was the moment where silence would stop being neutral. If I ignored her, I would be complicit in protecting something that was actively dismantling two marriages. If I answered, I would change the trajectory for all of us. I answered carefully. I said I thought something was wrong. I said I had reasons. I did not accuse. I did not provide details. Within minutes she asked if we could talk. Not to confront anyone. Not to explode. Just to understand what was happening. That restraint told me she was already further along than she admitted. We met in a quiet public place where nothing dramatic could happen. Two people comparing notes without emotion. Just facts. Days. Times. Behaviors. Patterns. It was unsettling how cleanly everything overlapped. Same excuses. Same emotional cycles. Same sudden affection at home after their meetings. We were not dealing with romance. We were dealing with logistics. The most important discovery came at the end of that conversation. Neither Emily nor Mark planned to leave their marriages. They were not building an escape. They were building an addition. Stability at home. Excitement on the side. The realization stripped away the last bit of confusion I had been carrying. This was not about losing my wife to another man. This was about my wife believing she could keep me and still live a second life without consequence. When I went home that night and watched Emily sleep, something fundamental changed. I was no longer waiting to be hurt again. I was done wondering what she would choose. I finally understood the position she had put me in, and with that understanding came a calm I had not felt since this started. I was no longer searching for the truth. I had it. Now I had to decide what to do with it. Knowing the full shape of the lie did not make it easier to live with. It made it heavier. Every normal moment became charged with meaning. Every casual touch felt borrowed. Every smile felt like something she expected me to maintain for her. I realized how much emotional labor I had been providing without noticing it. How much stability I represented in her life simply by staying predictable and kind. She did not fear losing me. She assumed I would always be there. That assumption became my leverage. I did not rush. Rushing would have turned this into a scene. I needed this to be clean, quiet, final. Over the next 2 weeks, I prepared in ways that would have shocked the version of me who still believed marriage was indestructible. Not big moves, small ones. One document, one account, one quiet decision at a time. I did not feel smart. I felt scared and methodical. I met with a lawyer and asked questions without emotion. I learned what mattered and what did not. I learned how timing could change everything. I learned how silence could be more powerful than accusation. At home, Emily started sensing the shift. Not because I was cold, but because I was neutral. I stopped filling gaps in conversation. I stopped reassuring her automatically. I did not accuse or withdraw affection dramatically. I simply stopped trying to manage her emotions for her. That unsettled her more than anger ever could. She began asking small questions. Was I okay? Was work stressful? Did I seem distant? I answered honestly but briefly. I said I was thinking. That was true. The tension peaked the night she told me she was going to that conference. She packed carefully, selecting clothes with intention, double-checking her makeup bag, moving through the house like someone preparing for something exciting while pretending it was exhausting. She hugged me longer than usual before leaving and told me she loved me. That moment tested me more than anything else. Love complicates clean decisions, but clarity held. I waited until she was gone before I made the final internal decision. I was not going to expose her publicly. I was not going to confront Mark. I was not going to beg or threaten or bargain. I was going to remove myself as the safety net she assumed would always be there. While she was away, I took quiet steps. I separated finances in ways that were legal and reversible but unmistakable. I moved important documents. I changed access permissions to shared accounts. I documented timelines and communications, not to punish, but to protect myself from revision. I made sure that when this ended, there would be no confusion about why. Every step I took meant there was no going back. When Emily came back, she was lighter than I had seen her in months. Relaxed, energized. She talked about the conference with vague enthusiasm, avoiding details, leaning on generalities. I listened without interrupting. I nodded when appropriate. I did not correct her. I did not ask questions. The absence of reaction unsettled her. I could see it in the way she watched me out of the corner of her eye, trying to locate her position again. A few days later, she tried to access a shared account and realized something had changed. She asked about it casually at first, then with concern. I told her I was reorganizing things and planning ahead. That answer made sense on the surface. Underneath, it landed like a warning she did not yet understand. The climax was not a fight. It was the moment she realized I was no longer playing the role she needed me to play. She felt it before she understood it. The house grew quiet in a different way. She began reaching for reassurance and finding none. I did not deny her comfort. I simply did not provide false stability anymore. By the end of that week, I was ready. Not emotionally ready, logistically ready. I had accepted the hardest truth of all. The marriage was already over. The only thing left to decide was how cleanly I would walk away and how clearly she would understand what she had lost when she assumed I would never leave. The end came on a quiet Sunday morning, the kind that used to feel safe. Sunlight through the kitchen window, coffee cooling in our mugs. No background noise except the refrigerator humming. Emily sat across from me at the same table where we had planned vacations and talked about maybe buying a bigger house someday. She looked at me for a long time before she finally asked if something was wrong between us. Not angry, not defensive, careful, like someone who sensed the ground had shifted but did not yet know how far. I told her I knew about Mark. I did not raise my voice. I did not pace. I did not list evidence like a prosecutor. I simply said I knew about Thursdays, the coffee shop, the conference that never existed, and how long I had known. Her face changed slowly, not in a dramatic collapse, but in stages. Confusion first, then fear, then the understanding that there was no version of this conversation where she could talk her way out. She cried. She tried to explain. She said it was a mistake that went too far. She said it did not mean anything. She said it never changed how she felt about me. I listened until she finished, then told her something she was not prepared for. I told her I believed her, not because I forgave her, but because it did not matter. I told her she did not love me less. She just loved herself more than she respected me. That sentence landed harder than anger ever could. It reframed everything she had been telling herself. When I told her I was filing for divorce, panic replaced tears. Real panic. She asked if we could fix it. She asked about counseling. She asked for time. She promised to cut contact immediately. She reached for my hand like muscle memory would save her. I let her talk. Then I told her calmly that time was the one thing she had already taken without asking. I was not punishing her. I was opting out. What followed was not explosive. It was slow and devastating in ways that do not make good stories unless you live them. Mark did not leave his wife. Once Lauren confronted him with facts he could not deny, he shut down and disappeared, not out of remorse, but out of self-preservation. Emily lost him in a single day. No closure. No dramatic goodbye. Just silence. The excitement she had built her secret life around vanished instantly. Then reality started collecting its debts. Friends who had always assumed we were solid grew distant once the truth surfaced. The couple we used to barbecue with stopped replying. Invitations stopped. Conversations turned polite and careful, like everyone was trying not to touch the truth. Emily stayed in the house for a while, surrounded by the life she had treated as permanent. She reached out more than once after I moved out. Not to reconcile, to talk, to ask if I was really done, to tell me she missed how safe she felt with me. That word stayed with me. Safe. She did not say loved. She said safe. And I realized that was the thing she lost and could not replace easily. Safety built over years does not regenerate on demand. I moved on carefully, not quickly. I rebuilt my life without drama. New routines. New space, new silence that belonged to me. I did not feel victorious. I felt clear. There is a difference people do not talk about enough. Victory is loud. Clarity is quiet and stable. Emily lost a man who was steady, loyal, and present, not because he failed her, but because she assumed he would never leave. That assumption was the real betrayal. By the time she understood what she had traded away for secrecy and attention, it was gone. Permanently. Sometimes I wonder what story she tells herself now. Maybe one where I gave up too easily. Maybe one where she was misunderstood. I no longer need to correct it. The truth does not require agreement to exist. She did not lose me when I filed for divorce. She lost me the moment she assumed I would stay. Thanks for watching. If the story stayed with you, consider subscribing to the channel. More stories like this are coming.